Okay, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
All right, yo, let's get into it.
Try to take over the world.
Preaching freedom.
Try to take over the world.
And greatest chaplain in the world, Mr.
Try
Lance
to
O'Neill.
take over the world.
What up, world? What up? What up? What up? What up? What up? What up? It is Sunday, 8:36 in the evening on the East Coast. You know where your POGs are. We are right here, locked and loaded. It's your boy KJ Bradley and the best chaplain in the world, Mr. Lance O'Neill. We're a couple of minutes late because the gremlins got in the system and caused us a little bit of technical difficulties. But we are live and back in the building. Did you miss us? We missed you guys. We're back and we got a great show for you tonight. We're going to get some guests in the building. Mr. James Abbott, if you guys remember, he came to join us almost about a year ago now. It's been a while. He's going to pop in at the 9 o'clock hour to come say, hey, Chappie, what up, man? How you been, brother?
So my oldest just drove in. So they came in from San Antonio. They're downstairs. I'm sure my wife, I'm going to hear about, you went to your podcast they just got? Well, yeah, they're fine. They don't care. Other than that, things are going good.
You are staying in trouble. I don't want her to blame me for it. It is not me.
Right.
Like you are not going to give me
KJ,
trouble.
I have a quick question before we start. Who's the president right now?
Who or where?
Who? Like, who is actually acting? Who is the actual? If there's a phone call tonight that Russia says, F it, we're dropping a nuke on Kyiv, who's taking the call and who's making a decision on the response?
I mean, we got cell phones, so I'm sure he's getting a call somewhere.
So you still trust that President Biden's making that decision?
I mean, he the man in the seat. I've in full transparency, I have given up on our government a while ago. I don't trust the man in the seat no more than I trust little Debbie to be in the bakery creating the pastries that I love to eat when I have a snack attack.
What about the Keebler elves? Are the elves?
Yeah, it's one of them things, man. I don't. I look at the president of the United States as a face. They're just a face. I have always tried to be consistent. I'm not as concerned about who sits in the seat. I'm more concerned about who's pulling the strings in the background. And that's one of the things that has me on pins and needles with the incoming administration. Like I said, it's interesting. I don't think I consider myself ever being on the ledge when it comes to this administration. I had a nervous pessimism when it came to this administration because it's not Donald Trump that I've ever worried about. I know who he is, right? I've seen him and his type 1,000,001 times throughout my life. It's the guys behind him who are able to manipulate people like him that concern me the most. And so far in his nominations, the type of people that he's trying to surround himself with are boding true. But to Congress's credit, one guy kind of fell off the ledge, and I don't think Sec Def is going to make it. This week's going to be interesting, though. If he survives the week, he has a fighting chance. He's taken some bullets. He's definitely taken some bullets, and he looked like he's willing to die on this sword. So give the guy credit. He is in it. He's in it for the long haul. Good, bad, indifferent. I don't know how that's going to play out for him, but we are definitely going to see, man.
I don't know if we talked about this with Gates, and it might be too much credit for 4D chess, but the idea that I heard was that does the Trump administration put up somebody like Gates or Hegseth to identify those individuals in the Senate since the Senate is even though it's 53 Republicans, there are 4 or 5 that are not exactly strong Republicans. Let's say they're more moderate. They're not going to go along with the president without a fight. So was that the idea to identify? Because Collins, Murkowski, Romney's out now, but was that a let's just put some underwear up on the flagpole and see who salutes?
I don't think Trump's that smart. It could be. It could be. A guy like Stephen Miller could absolutely be, be a test of loyalty to see. All right, let's see. If these guys get through, great. If not, then we know who we can trust and who, where our friction points are going to be. It's an interesting tactic for sure. But the whole cabinet, right? I am a fan of anarchy. I am a fan of chaos, but I am also a fan of just, I am a fan of principles. You know what I mean? Like you can't lie to me, right? You can't lie to my face and say, hey, this person isn't qualified or that person isn't qualified. Don't what the biggest issue I have with Republicans and I'm gonna be quite frank when I say this. A lot of my lighter skinned demographics, they'll sit back and they'll jump on this stoop and they'll jump, they'll cry to the mountains. That black person isn't qualified, or we need to find out what they did at 8 years old. Oh shit, they read a communist book when they were in middle school. We need to evaluate everything in their background, right? And rightfully so. I am absolutely with it. But you'll get another guy or girl who'll go through confirmation or whatever, and they'll be like, is it really that important? We don't really care. And it's not an equal playing field. And that just lends itself to the whole two America thing. And I'm cool with it. Because it's the same thing I've been saying since we started the show. There's 2 Americas. And it's always been 2 Americas. And it's just, there was a time where you were able to kind of hide it, but we're in the age now to where the hypocrisy is so apparent to where it's just like, yeah, this is what it is. And you either take it or leave it, but this is the game. And I'm cool with it. And I'm okay with it.
And maybe my lighter skinnedness is showing here, but I personally think there's some reasons for some of those things. And like if you look at, okay, let's go couple. I'll give you a couple examples that might pop up. Okay. Why did people freak out with Obama? Well, the birth certificate was the easy thing. The bigger thing in his background was his grandfather, his mentor, in fact, I don't think he was actually a blood relative. I think it was like his mentor was a card carrying communist. His parents were both communists. His mom for sure was. His dad was more communist with he's what the Chinese communists used to be, which was, hey, yeah, I might believe in socialism and all that, but I want to make a buck. So, hey, if that means going working for the oil company in Thailand, that's what I'm going to do.
Yep.
And so then the question becomes, okay, well, how much of that did that rub off? And it's kind of this.
Hold on, wait. Hold on.
Sure.
I want to stop right there. Wait, I want to stop right there because I want to freeze it. All right. We said the biggest issue with Obama was his grandfather, maybe not a blood relative, was a communist, right?
No, hold on. I'm not saying that's the big. That's not the biggest issue. I'm just saying when you're talking about doing the background,
right? Okay. But I'm saying that was an issue, right? Now we're going to stop it. We're going to freeze it, right? Now let's go back and let's wait. But I want to bring it to a bigger point. Let's go back and bring it. Trump's grandfather. Do we know his background? Do we know his support?
Mr. Trump?
Yes, we know. We know his support, right? He supported some pretty evil dudes who supported some pretty bad things. Does that matter at all? It absolutely doesn't. It should, but that's what I'm saying. It absolutely should. but not to the magnitude of an Obama to that extent. And I'll take it. I'll take your example one step further. Right, we can go to our Supreme Court picks. Right, we sat back and we said, all right, we talked about Ketanji Brown Jackson. Right, we know this woman. We scrutinized her background up, down, left, and right, and rightfully so. Right, when President Joe Biden came on, and he said, I am going to nominate a black woman and put her on the Supreme Court, right? The first thing I said is, one, he better make damn sure she's qualified, right? And that is absolute. I said the criteria for her now has to be, she has to be, not just qualified, but she has to be overly qualified, right? And to his credit, she absolutely was. She absolutely was. KJB was a phenomenal pick, and I think she's doing a kick-ass job. Then you take back and you go look at a Supreme Court justice like Amy Coney Barrett, who had not tried a single freaking case at the federal level, and she is a freaking stinking SCOTUS. But we didn't question that. We didn't have a single concern. We said, you know what? She's good. Do you know why she's good? Because she fits the profile. We didn't dig into the why. We didn't ask why she was put in. We didn't talk about why she was picked. Anything. We just said that, hey, Amy Coney Barrett was good.
Okay, just real quick.
Yeah.
Barrett was a U.S. Circuit judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit from 2017 to 2020.
Yep. Now go look at the court. Look at the cases she's seen. Go look at the cases she's seen. She was a judge. Well, look at the cases she's seen.
There's over 4 years.
Yeah.
Let me propose one thing about KJB.
Sure.
When she got up and she was asked, what is a woman? And she says, I'm not a biologist. To me, that's where the credibility went out the window. Now,
but is she a biologist?
What's a woman? Really? I can't answer that. I'm not a biologist. What's a rock? I'm not a geologist.
Is she a biologist?
It doesn't matter. If you can't say what a woman is, then there's a problem. And we all know why she was doing that, right? So if you had, and I'm saying Kavanaugh got hit with the false accusations. You've got KJB was hit with, I think hers was kind of self-inflicted, because if she had just said, look, a woman is an adult female, but I also believe that there are people that were born biologically male, however, their gender, blah, 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 and she'd gone into it, I think it would have been fine. It came off as somebody who was unwilling to not even take a stance, but get in on the most basic thing. And then you see some things like, for me, and given part of this is press coverage and all that, when she says something along the lines of the First Amendment is really something that is difficult because it doesn't allow the United States government to function the way that would be easier. And I'm paraphrasing, of course. You have a Supreme Court justice saying the First Amendment's a problem. So, I think they all get scrutinized. I think as a whole, we've lost the, let me back up real quick. Whose job is it to vet anybody in the public eye, whether it's a local school board member up to the president of the United States? What person or group's job is it?
But that I don't know. But the question I would ask you your issue was, you had an issue with KGB having an issue with the First Amendment, right? But Amy Coney Barrett said she had an issue with the Voting Rights Act. She didn't know, and then the Affirmative Action Act, right?
Constitutional acts? Those are part of the Constitution?
The first one is voting rights. Yeah.
The Voting Right Act is an act. It's not a constitutional amendment. The constitutional amendment would be the 13th Amendment, which would be, isn't
14th,
I thought
right?
13th was everybody was votes.
14. I think it's 14.
It's
Let me go look. I want to make sure I'm right.
It could be because they find all this stuff with like the 14th Amendment, the privacy, the privacy is under the 14th Amendment too.
Voting. Yeah.
Okay. 14. Okay. So saying I have problems with certain laws that are passed is different than saying I don't agree with the Constitution. Okay. Because the Constitution is what the Supreme Court's supposed to go off, and they're supposed to say, I have a problem with laws.
Well, yeah. Well, to be fair, KJP never said she had a problem with the Constitution.
She said she had a problem with the First Amendment.
Right.
So
and that's what I'm saying. Tony Barrett had a problem with the 14th Amendment. So which one's more important? Neither, right? They're all amendments.
I'd be curious. I don't know what I can't speak for what she said. I don't know what she said about the 14th Amendment.
But see, again, that's my whole point on it, right? You have one justice saying one thing, and that was a concern, that was an issue. But you have a history of Amy Coney Barrett having issues with voting rights. Matter of fact, when she was a circuit judge, one of her biggest rulings that she had to recuse herself of was the redistricting of her road, because it came through her region, and she had to recuse herself of it, citing some issues she had with it and her beliefs on the 14th Amendment.
Well, then good. But I'm glad she recused herself.
Well, yeah, I'm glad she didn't, because that wouldn't have worked out, in our favor.
So what should happen? The reason vetting doesn't happen anymore is because the vetting is supposed to be done by the fourth estate, by the media. That's who vets for the public. I'm not talking about like the FBI or CIA. CIA, wouldn't that be interesting? But that's what's and so when you have a media and journalism as a writ large that have basically given up any moral and ethical standing that they have, then it all falls by the wayside, and that's where you have the wild, wild west, right? And you have somebody like Trump who can come in and get elected and then reelected. It's funny. I heard a really interesting one. Actually, it was on Rogan because he was talking about himself. He was talking with Adelson, and they were laughing because Rogan said, I keep hearing this, that the left needs to go find their own Joe Rogan. They need to go find their own. And what's stupid is they had a Joe Rogan. I was on their side, and they got crazy. And then, so I was with them. The gay riots, this, that, the other. I was with them, and they went nuts. So it was just really funny because you see, like the New York Times, he's like, you can't trust the New York Times at all. What's funny is I have a subscription to the New York Times because I like to see the actual. Oh yeah, because okay. So being a conservative, I don't watch Fox News. I haven't watched a minute of Fox other than the election coverage just to see as they were picking. I have not watched a minute of Hannity in probably 8-9 years. I don't watch. I might listen if I'm driving home. I'll listen to the Fox News channel, not the news, but the circulating every 20 minutes because they actually do the news stories, not any of the opinion stuff. And a large reason for that is I already know what the conservative viewpoint is. It's my viewpoint. I could make the same arguments. Most of the stuff that these guys are making, I'm like, yeah, I can make that argument pretty easily. But I need to know what the other side is saying so I can, kind of devil advocate. Because if I don't know what the New York Times is putting out there, how am I supposed to say, well, the New York Times is biased about this, that, or the other, if I don't know what they're saying? Sure. But at the same time, the New York Times generally does a pretty good job with hard news. So with what's going on in Syria right now, I'm going to read the New York Times. The Drudge report has gone, to me, very, very anti-Trump. And so they've lost, Matt Drudge has lost his objectivity. But it's still a good place to go in. And as long as you kind of ignore the top headline ones that are political, it's a good place to go. Oh, that's a good story. Oh, that's an interesting story. But I think that one of the things, and we talked about this a couple times ago, was we have so much money in the electoral system that you can't have a common person. I've had people say to me, well, why don't you run? How am I going to run? I live paycheck to paycheck like everybody else. I don't have somebody down the street that goes, hey, Lance, you know what, man? I'll set up your super PAC. I got you. And, you have AOC who, I was just a bartender. She had some, there was a bankroll going on. There was no doubt there was a bankroll going on.
Interesting you mentioned that the millionaire that sponsored her initial campaign ended up, he's dropped a couple of opinion pieces here lately talking about how she abandoned her district and how he has buyer's remorse for backing her initially. Because
really,
she got to Washington and just forgot about
Gracie,
it.
you need to go out. Sorry.
You're
child
good.
Underneath the bed.
Trust me, man, I got you. She
yeah, but I have an 11-year-old Raptor. Yours makes sense to be climbing under the bed.
But yeah, no, he
the dog out.
He dropped his opinion piece talking about how she neglected the district and how the district's overrun with crime and prostitution, and he can't get in touch with her. Her office is never open. She never comes back to her district. And basically she's more focused on fame as opposed to
when she shut down. When she actively shut down, was it Amazon that was trying to put a big distribution center there, or call center or something, that would have been like 3,000 jobs, and she did everything she did to squash that?
Mm-hmm.
That was that. I mean, you're taking money out of people's mouths, and the problem I have is she can be highly disliked. She can be somebody that just we don't like her. We need to get somebody new. But the way the system is set up for A, incumbents to continue to be incumbents, and B, with redistricting, and both sides do this. So it's not just Republicans, Democrats and Republicans absolutely gerrymander. So if you have somebody in that position, she's not going to lose unless it's somebody really comes in with just overwhelming force and is able to do something that is kind of phenomenal. So that's why you have so few of these. Now, you have incumbents lose Republican versus Democrat, but very rarely do you have a Democrat or a Republican get primaried. And that's why you hear stuff like that. Oh, we should primary this guy. We should primary that guy. Well, even the primary system can be screwed up. The guy who just is replacing Romney, he was the head of the Utah Democratic Party from like 2000, 2006. You think if he wanted to get into a position in D.C., he thought, gee, Utah's dark red. I'm never going to be able to win in Utah. What should I do?
Right. All right.
Maybe.
We're coming up on the 9 o'clock hour. Chappie, I'm going to let you take the lead. We got James in the waiting room. We're going to bring him in. I'm going to let you guys. I'm going to let you guys take the lead. I am going to find this guy's information so I can come back in. Welcome to the stage. Mr. Abbott, what up, James? Brother? It's been a while. How you been?
Good evening. Thank you. Doing well. Thank you very much, guys.
Welcome back. Welcome back. It's good to see your beautiful face again, man. I'm glad to have you back on the show.
Hey, thanks very much.
All right. I believe
now with James, we only have about 15 minutes for him.
You got it. Go ahead.
Right? So James and I earlier. Now, I just feel so strange calling him James because I've known him as Jamie my entire life.
Absolutely.
Jamie. So
either one is great. I love it.
So some of the things, Jamie, and you go, dude. I want to hear your thoughts on all of these because you have DOGE on here, opportunities for pruning, meaning cutting down on government. The tariffs. I think tariffs. I think is kind of the most misunderstood position that Trump has. And so you did a long post on that. So you know what? Go. Take over. You are currently a third POG.
Okay. Well, I guess on the tariff, we can start with tariffs and maybe move to DOGE and inefficiencies. They're both related. The tariff thing, what what drives me crazy, I'll be listening to a podcast or reading an article, and my most recent musing came from reading an article or listening to an article about tariffs and the terror that people are trying to gin up by writing these articles about how terrible the tariffs will be. And I thought, this was a few months ago that I kind of did the analysis, and I said, let's actually figure out what the actual effect of tariffs would be. And I went in and I said, how much of the money that we spend as Americans goes to goods? Because you can't really tariff services.
Right.
So what do I care about? I care about goods that are being imported. And so I looked at that. Services are almost 80% of what we spend our money on as Americans. And I thought about that. And I said, it sounds really high. Well, it's doctors, lawyers, entertainment. So every time you go to a Taylor Swift concert, that's a service. It's not a good. And you can kind of allow your mind to run with that without going through the whole laundry list of all the things we spend our money on: our hair, our nails, pedicures. Lance, you and I had a great discussion about whether we're pedicure guys or not. I'm not. I think if I remember right, you're not as well.
Nope, never have.
But kind of at the end of the process, 80%, roughly 80%, goes to services. So that's not at risk for going up in price under a tariff. Then you have to look at how much do we import, and that's about $6 trillion out of $28 trillion in GDP. But not all of the $6 trillion that we import are final products, and that's what's counted in the GDP figure. So if you import a component and then put that component into your car and then sell the car, the government counts the sale of the car as the contribution to GDP or the national economy. They don't count the cost or the value of the product that was put in. So it's really probably 50% of the goods that we use are imported. So now you're down to 10% of total economic spend is from imports. When you consider that, might be less than that, but I'm trying to get close to the concept. And at the end of the day, if you take those prices up by 10%, 20%, 30%, we'll be able to absorb that. My calculation when I did this a few months ago was that it'll cause an inflation effect of about 0.2%. So that's 0.2%, one time 0.2% increase in prices. Barclays, according to The Economist magazine, The Economist quoted Barclays research, and they called it 0.4%. So my back of the envelope math wasn't that far off. Barclays, I'm sure, spent, I don't know, thousands and thousands of dollars coming up with their answer. And so my point would be is that if you're worried about inflation, that it is going to cause a little bit of an increase in price if it's done and there's no other effect going on besides that. What we don't know is how much companies will absorb, how much the Chinese companies will absorb of that. So we could put a tariff up of 100% and the Chinese companies will say, selling to the United States is not an okay outcome. We will reduce our profit margins to be able to continue to sell to the United States because some profit from the United States is better than zero. So, and that's what happened last time under Trump. So when you throw it all into the blender, it may not be 0.4%. It may not be 0.2%. It may be like zero by the time it's all absorbed. So that would be.
Don't you also have potential? Don't you also have potential, especially with China, for the Chinese government to essentially, not that they aren't subsidizing all the companies to begin with, but the government saying, you know what, we're going to pay that tariff out of the coffers. So the company, you just do you, we got your tariff. Here you go. Yeah.
The Chinese government they have spent money like it's going out of style. Their debt ratio is very bad. You think our situation's bad. Theirs is worse by a lot. So they have grown at a really rapid pace. So the Chinese government is the second largest economy in the world at this point, behind the United States. I think if the trend line continues, my recollection from some math that I did, I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say it was within 7 to 10 years as they will pass the United States. The United States has been relatively flat, but the Chinese government's been doing it with a lot of debt and deficit spending to get there. That can only last so long, presumably. But to your point, they could absolutely continue to decide to deficit spend and absorb those tariffs for those companies. So
also, I saw somebody who was a Chinese economist expert, who he's predicting a crash of the Chinese economy in the next 7 to 10 years, in large part because of the overspending. So we're looking at these things going, hey, this is what we think is going to happen, but they could have the equivalent of their housing bubble burst or their tech bubble, which I guess for them would be a government spending bubble as well, which would reset a lot of our thinking.
Yeah. I think it's yes. So I think the U.S. is headed for lack of a better term, a come to Jesus moment with the deficit and the debt levels, and the Chinese government are ahead of us on that front. They've done a lot of overbuilding that. And I'm not an expert on this, but you don't have to spend too much time looking up articles on how many vacant buildings have been constructed over there that have resulted in they look fantastic, but they're empty. So it's a huge bubble that's being supported by taxpayer money over in China. But at some point, you run out of money to support that. Taxpayer and debt and investor money. So investors, those investors who are buying Chinese debt.
Well, until Lance gets back, they have a significant amount of money invested in real estate here stateside as well.
Yeah.
And then also they have, last time I checked, between 30 and 45% of their money invested in agriculture as well. They've been buying up significant swaths of farmland here over the last decade as well. So how does that affect, their perceived bubble or their deficit spending? Because if they crash, how's that going to affect the investments that they have here that we depend on? Because I know a lot of investors are kind of hedging their bets on some investments backed by Chinese ventures.
Well, the only thing that I could think is, you've got a couple of options for that. I'm not an expert on this, but one is if they are in need of funding because they can't continue to fund their spending, then they can liquidate assets. And so they could do a mass fire sale of land here in the United States. They could do a fire sale of United States Treasury debt as well, which would drive Treasury yields significantly higher. So
you could realistically also see a national security movement by the Trump administration that basically says, if the Chinese have any farmland within this radius of a military base or other national security interest location, guess what? They lose it. So sorry. No. And the eminent domain without the payout. And if they do that, my guess is they're going to find everywhere is within that radius. It's not going to be that hard to say, hey, Augusta National is within 100 miles of China. This farmland's within, Augusta National. Yep.
Yeah, and they absolutely could do that. So it depends on how hostile the relationships get, because the other side of that coin, obviously, is that any of the assets that we have over in China, whether it's Kentucky Fried Chicken or McDonald's locations or any of those kinds of things that are where there are U.S. based companies that have invested in assets over there, is like the situation that developed with Russia and Ukraine. And the domestic companies that had assets over in Russia just kind of walked away from it and said, we're we're going to abandon our business over there. And it might have been 5% of the assets of that business or 10% of the assets of that business. It could have been that's a big hit for a company to take in those situations, but it does happen. It's not common, but we don't have to go back that far in history to see one example where people, that one wasn't forced by the Russian government, but it was effectively a moral decision that U.S. companies made to walk away.
Well, and for every instance of that, you have Venezuela that came in and stole privatized, like Chevron. They lost everything in it. Yep. And the irony is, so Chevron gets their entire oil system stolen by the Venezuela government. And then within 2 years, the Venezuela, which is, I believe, was third in oil production in the Western Hemisphere, basically dried up to nothing, because then they went, hey, we need someone to come help us run the machines and do all the upkeep. Hey, Chevron, would you be? And they were like, no, we're not helping you.
Doesn't work that way.
So Jamie, since we only have a little bit, I want to hear your thoughts on the just hilariously named DOGE and the bloat of the U.S. government, which I'm guessing we're going to have some very similar thoughts on. Yeah,
well, so I think I'm not aware, and if somebody wants to correct me on this, then that's totally great. But so I lived in the Washington, D.C. area for a number of years, a little over a decade. And a lot of the people I knew were government employees. And I heard a common refrain, which is, you cannot fire anyone. Had a conversation recently with a very senior professional at one of the government banking regulatory agencies. And they talked about a situation where an employee was totally inept, completely inept, but they couldn't fire them. And it took them years, I want to say about 3 years, of documenting failure after failure before they could try to terminate that employee. And meanwhile, the employee wasn't working very hard, et cetera. I've got another friend who is currently employed by the federal government, and they would tell you that they work something on the order of 3 hours per week, and their compensation is mind-blowing. It's a very large number. So hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. Okay. So, and I won't name any names, but by their own admission, they're not working hardly at all. Now, they're in that situation, that person perhaps is being paid for their subject matter expertise, but they're still not working very much. So as you kind of look through the government, I did some quick analysis of how many employees there are in government, and because of the Civil Service Act that prevents the termination of those employees, once you're in for life, basically, if you want to be. And not working in government myself, I couldn't tell you exactly what the case is, but I've spoken to a number of people who are in senior positions who have talked about how difficult it is to terminate an employee. So there's about 3 million federal employees, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, almost exactly 3 million as of November of 2024. So when you start to think about how could you cut, what are the options that you could do? So one of the things that I've observed in my own professional experience is you'll hire somebody, you think they're a good employee, you do the interview, you talk to them for half an hour to an hour to maybe 4 or 5 hours, depending on the position. And multiple people are talking to this person, and you say, I feel pretty good about this person. You hire them, they might do a really good job for a year or two, and maybe they get passed over for a promotion that they wanted, and then they decide that they're just going to coast. Or maybe you hired them, you thought they were going to be good, you did all your due diligence, and they turn out to not be a very good employee. They're not suited for the job that they're in, but you like them. So it's really hard to terminate them. So because you don't, they've got a family. You don't want to do that kind of stuff. So I actually really have Elon Musk's approach to this has really resonated with me, because he's saying, actually, I like Bill Ackman's a little bit better than Musk's. So Musk was give him a 2-year severance package. Bill Ackman's approach was tell them that we'll give them a severance package, but it's a year, and it gets paid upon the finding of a new job in the private sector. So if it takes you a month to find a new job in the private sector, you get paid a whole year all at once in one, and you're done. If you're struggling to find a job, maybe it takes you 9 months, 12 months, whatever. And so then you've got this lifeline that's supporting you along the way. But it gives people an economic incentive to jump on to not sit on the unemployment train for very long, to get out there, earn the money, start getting another job, and start moving forward. So what happens? And I've seen this happen. I've been at 2 companies that have done it. So I've seen it firsthand in probably about 4 or 5 times now at those 2 companies. And then I've watched several other companies do it, which is termination of 5% of the workforce or 10% of the workforce, almost for no reason at all. And what it does is it forces managers to say who is not well placed in a job, and it's a disservice to that employee to continue to flounder in a job that they're not well suited for. Maybe that they got promoted from a widget maker to a manager, and they're not very good at managing people. So now they're in a job that they weren't really very suited for. They were a great manufacturer, but they're not a very good manager. And so but nobody wants to fire them because they like them and stuff like that. It forces managers to make tough decisions that managers, as humans, we just generally, with empathy, we don't want to do that. And so you have to go in, you have to do it. You have to take 1 out of 20 employees has to go. It prunes the employee base so that you get people that are not well placed in their jobs out of their jobs. That's not the only reason you would do it. It might be something simply that we've got a lot of waste and we can automate some of these things and so forth. But that's the concept. Hopefully I'm painting the picture appropriately, is that it's these employees oftentimes go on and they've been floundering in a job that they weren't well suited for. They were never going to get promoted. They were never going to get much of a raise. And now they have to go find a job that actually suits them, and they're going to excel at that.
Well, the engineer is probably the best example. So somebody's a really good engineer, right? They're really good at design. They're really good at, and so the company comes in and says, wow, you are such a good engineer. We want to make you a manager of the other engineers. And that guy has 0 people skills. And so he gets put in the management, and everybody below him goes, this guy sucks. And people above going, well, but we put him in that position. We can't exactly get rid of him because we chose him. That would look really bad for us. And you can't really go to the guy and go, hey, do you just want to go back and be an engineer? Because that guy's going, well, I make a lot more money doing it this way. So I'm torn between giving, you give somebody a year. Like, why should somebody get a year just because they're in the federal workforce? Like, if I get fired, a normal job, and I get fired, I know when I was laid off, I think I got 4 weeks of severance, and it was because layoff from a tech company. This would have been 25 years ago. And that forced me to go get a new job. Not, hey, I've got an extra year. I think the one thing that Trump sounds like, and what I've heard that might be the most effective thing simply is saying, all right, if you want to continue to get paid by the federal government, you have to be in the office, because there's this story, I think Ackerman or whoever Rogan was talking to, he's like, these guys, they're required to be in their seats, in their desk 1 day a month. So what they'll do is they'll come to work on the 30th of the month, and then the next day, the 1st of the month, and then they'll go home because they have a nice house in Appalachia or somewhere that's a lot less expensive, really nice house. They'll pay for the hotel for the one night. And that makes it, because you can't live in DC, the cost of living is ridiculous. So I think that if the government, if if the DOGE comes out, and the irony of this whole thing is people saying, well, the DOGE doesn't have any power. It's like, you guys, most of the stuff most of the reasons these people have these positions is because they were hired without any having the real power. KJ and I have talked to this. Let's do it. Let's test Jamie's constitutional knowledge. What are the
don't do that. I'm not a constitutional law expert.
It's okay. It's not a trick question, but it's a real interesting question. What are the only two things that the Constitution allows for federal employees? There's only two, and they're basically two organizations or labels that are guaranteed by the Constitution for the government to provide.
There are two things that the Constitution. My first thought is Congress, but
Nope.
But maybe that's not what you're asking. Maybe I'm not sure that I totally follow.
What two organizations? What is the federal government required? What services are the federal government required to provide?
Well, I think the IRS or the taxation.
Remember, IRS didn't come in. IRS didn't come in until the early 20th century, and tariffs were how the government made their money before that.
Yeah. Well, I remember because I've sued the IRS and I won. So I remember, and it's a constitutional requirement. So maybe the IRS itself isn't.
But it wasn't originally. So originally, I work. I'll give you a hint. I work for one of them right now.
Oh, the military.
because it provides a defense of the nation.
And then
okay,
rain, sleet, snow.
Oh, the postal. Okay.
So all that other stuff when people say, "Oh, we need the federal government," I'll tell a quick COVID story. When I was in San Antonio as a chaplain, Army chaplain, we had people as analysts working for one of the alphabet soups, and we went all the way down to COVID to red staffing, the lowest level of staffing, which was 25% staffing. Some people would work 1 week, some people would come in and work the other week, so back and forth. Some people, the civilians never came in during that time. It was just the military and a few handful that were absolutely necessary. We went down to 25% of staffing during COVID for like a year. You know how many missions we missed?
Zero.
We hit every required mission.
That's
so
amazing.
when that happened, I was like, why aren't we firing 75% of the people that work here? You know, or 50%. If you're going to half on, half off, keep half of. And I do think the federal government, the other way to get rid of federal government employees, real simple, and I know it's not simple, but you move the federal government to Wichita.
Nothing against Wichita, of course.
Right. No, but just move somewhere. If you did that, and if you decentralized the federal government and said, okay, let's go with the Wichita for a second. The Department of Agriculture, should it be in Washington, D.C., or should it be in Ames, Iowa, or in Lincoln, Nebraska, or Wichita, Kansas? What makes more sense there? Right?
You raise a good point that there's a lower cost of living in a lot of places outside of the Washington, D.C. Beltway. And so I think I would also add that technology is there to enable the ability for the workforce within the federal government system to trim by automation, reducing that workforce. So you take jobs that are very repetitive and mundane and probably are not very interesting to most employees. I mean, we've all been in jobs where it was a very boring and dull job, and we just had to do it over and over and over again for 8 hours a day. It's not good for the mental health of that person compared to what they could be doing. So let's automate that job. Let's get them out of that job and repurpose them in a place where they're actually using their intelligence better than what they've got. Let's move some of these places to a lower cost of living. and let them be done there. I think if you were to take 10% of the government employees, which is not hard to do, a lot of these companies do these 10% reduction in forces about once every 5 years. General Electric is a classic example of that. The guy that sort of made that famous was a guy named Jack Welch. And if you did that and you assumed that the total cost of compensation per federal employee is $150,000, and somebody would say, "No, hold on a second, that's way too much." And I'd say, well, we're talking total cost. So that's office space, that's computer, that's technology, that's healthcare. My healthcare costs as a private, as a self-employed person for 2025 will be $49,000. So if you want to know how much healthcare costs really, go pay for it yourself, and you find out very quickly it's a really big nut. So when you take some of those kinds of things out of it, now $150,000 doesn't sound so crazy. You're looking at over a 10-year period of time, which is how the typical budget is constructed. When they say, how much is this going to cost the federal government when we change this tax plan or whatever, they usually do it in 10-year increments. So it's $500 billion. Now, and that's only 10%. Lance, to your point, you could probably cut 20, 30, 40% because you guys were able to operate at 25% of your normal and you got it done. Now, you didn't have any backup, and you don't want to have zero backup. That's bad too. Right. You want to have some contingency. You want to be training the next generation, et cetera. So it shouldn't cut to the bone. And I know that's not what you're saying, but that's the idea is it at least 10%. And that gets you $500 billion over that period of time. And that is deflationary. So you've got tariffs. I'm going to bring it all back to tariffs, and then I'm going to run. You've got these tariffs that may be slightly inflationary, and then you've got all this other reduction in pressure, and that's deflationary. And at the end of the day, you may have zero inflation, and you've got a more lean and mean federal government.
We could keep going, but you got to go because I would keep talking.
I got to run. Hey, love to be back on here again, guys. It's always great to talk with you.
Glad to have
we will.
You, man.
We'll get you back on.
I'm going to jump on and listen to the rest of your broadcast, but I got to go for the remainder. Have a great night.
All right, brother. Take care.
Glad to have you guys.
All right.
So, KJ, with that, to continue that thought, Jamie didn't need to be on for this part, but by math, if you retire after 20 years at a position in government, that's kind of the goal for every government employee, right? Is 20 years, right? Hit that retirement. If you simply had a hiring freeze for 4 years in every single position and just out of retirement, you would lose 20% of the workforce without firing a single person in 4 years. Because 20 years, that's 5%. Every 5% of every year is going to be hitting 20 years. Okay. 1 out of 20, 5%. So you could do this if Trump and the federal government just said, we're just not going to hire anybody. We have a complete hiring freeze or a real minimal hiring freeze and say, okay, we're going to hire like 1% for, super expertise or whatever. You could reduce the size of the government by 20% with no harm, no foul. And even more because you would have people that aren't going for 20 years, they'd get out. And I know the argument would be, oh, but then you have this gap and people won't pay. No, as soon as when the hiring freeze, let's say you drop down to that 80% level, in 4 years, you can start hiring again and you can hire 5% every year. That 5% that's new is now replacing the 5% that's going out. And so it's just a replacement level. And so you could very easily reduce the size of the federal government by 20% without firing a single person, without any damage, because 5 years from now, now there might be people in the next 4 years ago, oh, but I really wanted a federal government job. Well, yeah, too bad. I guess you're going to have to compete for it in 4 years. But it's such a simple fix. And
Damn.
It's just something that I wish our quote unquote leaders would actually do some stuff like this instead of fighting. You already have these people coming out saying, we're going to fight DOGE. They have no power. They have nothing, blah, blah, And it's like, well, wait a minute. You're going to fight for inefficiency? You're going to fight. This goes back to my argument against unions, my general, because I know there are unions sometimes have their value. I'm not a union guy, but I will put it out there. I'm sure there are some unions that have some value in some situations. But unions are there to protect the bad employees. They're not there to protect the good guys, because the good employees don't need a union. They can go in and they say, look, I'm a top 10 performer. I want a raise. I want that promotion. And they're going to get that. The unions are there to go, oh, you want to fire this guy? Well, he's been paying us union dues. So no, you need to keep him. I think that's a fairly accurate position. And the 80% in the middle, they're kind of like, well, we get some benefits from the collective bargaining and some things like that. But when you have these people coming out and going after, now, if the argument is DOGE can't do this because they're not a federal agency, well, yeah, they're not. I don't think people realize that Musk and Ramaswamy don't have any power. They're not going to be going in and saying, hey, you are being fired. Liberty, I don't like how you're working, and so you're fired. Here's your pink slip. What they're going to do is they're going to go in and they're going to say, we've identified that this department that Liberty works in is inefficient. We've looked at the numbers. We've looked at what they produce. We've looked at how much they're making. We've looked at the federal government. We've looked at, their output. We've seen how many hours they work. We see how many man hours are actually required to effectively do this job. So right now, this department needs somewhere in the range of 10,000 man hours per month, but they are paying out 80,000 man hours per month. So it is our recommendation that the administration comes in and basically cuts 70,000 man hours, or in this case, whatever that percentage would be, 86% or of the workforce or whatever. And then Trump would, depending on how it works, whether it is, because remember, as the executive, he's got a lot of pull about what happens in DC as the executor, right? He can't pass laws, but he can do things like hiring and firing if it falls under the executive branch, which most of these do. So then he can come in and Trump can sign that executive order that says, all right, Department of Donuts, you guys only have 10,000 man hours. That is the equivalent of 100, 200. My math is going to be completely off. 250 employees, right? And with weekends and all that. So let's just say it's 250 employees. But right now you have 1,000 employees. So within 30 days, you need to identify 750 individuals that are going to be terminated. Maybe that's the way it goes. Maybe that department goes in and says, all right, to me, this is how you would do it. It's the, what were they called on Office Space? The Bobs? The two guys that came in? What were their names? It was the Bobs, wasn't it?
I don't remember.
You know what I'm talking about on Office Space, though? Yeah. What do you do here? Like, what do you do? I'm a people person. I take the specs from the customer and give them to the engineers. Well, couldn't the customer just give the specs to the engineer? Well, but no, I'm a people person. So if the Bobs come in and go, all right, you're going to keep 250 people. So we can do it for you, or you can do it. And I think there's something to be said for outer agencies coming in and doing that, because then you you don't get the buddy system of, well, I'm keeping KJ because KJ is my buddy. And even though KJ is not one of my top 250 guys that I can keep, KJ's more like in the 400, but hey, we're golf buddies. And I know his wife, and my wife and his wife are real close. And, you know, if I let KJ go, there's going to be hell to pay at home. Right. So to Jamie's point, maybe that is where the technology comes in. Maybe the AI comes in and says, okay, because knowing the two guys that are running Doge, maybe that's what they do is they say, all right, we're going to have an algorithm written by AI, and you're going to be able to go in as a federal employee, and you're able to go in and you're able to write, here's what you do. Here's what your value is. Here's your hourly here. And now AI is going to match up what you say you do with what you actually do. And then AI is going to rank you. Mm-hmm. And now maybe you say as a manager, well, you know, we don't want to be so black and white as that. And maybe a manager can go in and say, well, you know what? Hey, I'm the football subcommittee. Even though you say that this guy is ranked 250, I can tell you for a fact, you know, he's actually higher than that. This guy at 300, he does some things that's not going to be seen. So he's SMU. You're just not aware that he should be at. Yeah, we get it. Alabama's there, but we think SMU really, I know what SMU does. So we're going to put SMU in there. And of course, the Democrats, it's not just the Democrats. Republicans there are Republicans who would be on the chopping block too. I think any federal government, any federal employee, you know, the military, we talk about how we're not hitting our recruitment numbers, right? Well, I'll tell you right now, there's a lot of people in the military who shouldn't be in the military, who don't do their jobs. I'm one of them. That's why I'm getting out. But I could name half a dozen people right now off the top of my head that I have worked with, and it would not be a loss to lose them. And they are making six figures in the military just out of rank, without even thinking about if they were just people that should not be in the military. And if you give me civilians that I've worked with, that military, triple that. I'm a firm believer that the military, the Department of Defense, should not be hiring civilians unless there is a very, very technical reason to do so. Like, you know, okay, so we need some cyber experts that are hackers, right? And you don't get a lot of guys that are coming up, going through basic and AIT that are hackers, but we need some guys, you know, maybe we need a contractor to come in that's going to brute hack this cartel computer. Okay, so we'll contract this guy or that guy. So yeah, you could do it here and there. But for the most part, we have civilians who are making the food on post for soldiers. We have civilians that are mowing the lawns. We have civilians that are doing work orders. What happened to the engineers that were the ones who were coming in and doing that? KJ, did you ever mow the lawn when you were in basic and AIT and just in normal military?
Yeah.
Me too. If there's a job a soldier can do, they should be doing it.
The difficult part about all of this is they're not crazy, right? You can't outright say that no, Doge is unreasonable, right? Because on the surface, there's a lot of bloat in the government that needs to be trimmed, right? And if we look at it objectively, there are a ton of individuals who are just absolutely stealing money.
Sure. And oxygen.
It just in the government, every entity in the government. So, but I see the Doge Department of Doge, or however they frame it, they're going to have a lot of legal hurdles that they're going to have to overcome. I don't see this as being a quick fix at all.
And that's where I disagree with you, because if you have now, again, if it was Doge coming in and saying you have to fire 20% of your workforce. Yeah, DOGE has no authority. But if the executor, who is President Trump, says the Department of Energy, my aunt worked for the Department of Energy for 30 years and she's retired, so she's not going to get cut. But if DOGE says the Department of Energy needs to cut 34% of their workforce, and President Trump comes in and says the Department of Energy will cut 34% of their workforce by the end of the FY, end of the fiscal year, 30 September. By the way, if that is not accomplished, everybody at a GS 13 and above will automatically be fired. That's who's going to take the cut. How you think they're going to identify people that need to go?
I mean, it's the same thing as saying, you know, hey, if we don't balance the budget, then everybody's ineligible for re-election. Could he do it? He absolutely could. Is that probably the most efficient way of using his executive?
Yeah, I don't. Well, I know what you're saying, but he couldn't say that. That's would not be an option because you can't restrict who runs. I get the idea. I love that. We've talked about this. That should absolutely be a law.
The problem you're going to run into is a lot of these guys, like for like the people who work, like the civilians who work on post or whatever. A lot of these guys are contracted in, right? And those contracts are locked in. So if you just go in and be like, hey, you buy, they're going to be like, hey, pay me, right?
Sure. And you're going to have that absolutely for contractors. But if you say, fine, and we are going to pay you, but we are not going to renew any new contracts, I don't believe those contracts are long-term. I believe they're year-by-year contracts.
No, some of them are locked in, especially like these guys here, you know, in the arson, and these contracts are locked in quite a bit. And they spend a lot of time. Like I said, you're gonna have these lobbyists are very good at what they do. And I suspect it's the same thing in DC. I'm not saying that, you know, they're going to give it the old college try. I just don't foresee it being as easy as, you know, them walking in and saying, hey, I'm with DOGE. One, Elon Musk isn't a government employee. They can make recommendations and reports all day long. Two, when Trump makes the recommendation and signs the executive order, I see a lot of congressmen on both sides of the aisle who have their, you know, financial interests tied into a lot of these civilians saying, hey, hold on, man, let's rethink this.
So since you're playing devil's advocate on this, and I appreciate that, what would be the devil advocate argument against the 4-year hiring freeze then?
No, the only issue you have with hiring freeze is you're already short. I mean, you look at the numbers and the reporting, like for an organization like the VA. I know they're talking about doing massive cuts to the VA. The VA has been perpetually short in staffing, right? Veterans have over a 30-day wait time for appointments, right? You talk about our SecDef has been, you know, a proponent of complaining about how bad the VA system is. Well, you take, you know, a hiring freeze for a system that's already, you know, suffering from some severe shortages, and you say, well, you can't hire anybody for the next 4 years. And, you know, you already have doctors and nurses who are being overworked, and you got veterans who can't be seen as it is anyway. Well, now you're just going to have to privatize the shit out of it anyway, which is the goal ultimately. I mean, that's the goal of the administration anyway, is to privatize.
That's what it should be realistically.
I mean, I don't know.
I think most vets, I think most vets, not all, let's say it's 50%. I think most vets would rather be able to call up a doctor and go in and say, hey, I need to be seen for this. And the doc calling up and saying, all right, hey, federal government, I got their VA, the VA card, the equivalent of TRICARE card, pay me that. I think most vets would rather do that. But to your argument,
the reason
that's where I also say, but
I agree with you. The reason
I was just going to say but that's why also, even if you say a hiring freeze, you can always have exceptions that the president can put in place. You don't want again, you don't want the Department of Energy to be the one that says, "Oh, no, hold on, you say hiring freeze, but we are still going to keep our exception is we need this and this." VA, for example, the VA would come back and say, "All right, hold on, we understand you want this, and we can comply with that. That said, we need to not have a hiring freeze on VA docs, nurses, and professional techs. You want to have a freeze on administrative? Because I guarantee you right now, the biggest drain in the VA are the secretaries and the administrative stuff.
Probably support staff. But
and how much of that could be
but
AI?
I'm saying, to your point, like when it comes to when you hear the biggest complaints with veterans, their complaint isn't with doctor staff. Their complaint is I can't be seen in a timely manner. So when it comes to privatization, if you continue the rehaul of the VA and say, hey, I can get these guys in within 36 hours. If you call and say, hey, I need to see a specialist and I can get you in the next 36 hours, I think a lot of veterans would be absolutely okay with that.
So
in terms of
that, but here's the problem with that. That is so pie in the sky. And the reason I say that is I called on Friday. I need to go see my military provider. I have a primary care provider on post at the Fort Eisenhower Hospital. Yeah. First of all, 30 minutes before somebody picked up the phone because the queue and I heard the line. So, okay, so be it. Takes that long for people to schedule. And then the first appointment for me to meet with not even my primary care provider, a primary care provider was 17 January.
Yeah.
So that's as an active duty soldier. Now I can call tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. and say, hey, did anybody cancel? Do you have any openings every morning? But I got other stuff I got to get done too, right? So the VA is not going to get that any better. But if my wife or if my daughter is sick and she's got that cough and we call up tomorrow morning and say, hey doc, our daughter's coughing up, we think it sounds like strep. We really need to get, and they'll say, okay, bring her in at 11:30. Cool. That's where the difference of a privatized versus the way the government has done. And I get it. Look.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the same thing in the civilian. The healthcare industry as a whole is having those same issues. You can call, you can call a doctor in the private sector now, and they're still, the dentist that we take our daughter to, they're slotting people out 45, 60 days out now. They just don't have, don't have. It's an industry issue. It's not necessarily a VA. I think it's cliche to say, it's a VA issue when it's really not. It's an industry issue. And the only reason I know that is because I just happen to be getting an MHA right now. And I have that industry insight to where it's like, they have a industry-wide shortage where they just don't have the nurses. They don't have the doctors. They don't have the specialists right now. So whether it's privatized or it's government subsidized, you're not getting in anywhere you go. So it's just what it is.
And so this is where we talked about this probably a year ago. And as we talk about this, two POGs save the world. The whole idea is when we talk about things is what's the solution, right? What is it that we could do to make things better? Well, again, for medical, I look at some real simple things for medical. And I'm not even talking about the insurance and cost. I think that what we need to do is we need to have more medical schools that pump out PAs, because most of the time a PA or a master's nurse, whatever the master RN, RSN, or whatever level, right? What are they doing? They're going in and they're saying, this is what's wrong with this person, and this is what they need. And they're right probably 95% of the time. And the 5% they were wrong, the first doc that saw them would probably be wrong the same 5%. They would probably have the same misdiagnosis. So we are not allowing enough nurses and enough PAs. There's that competition. Look, if somebody goes in, do I want an unqualified PA? No, of course not. But if you were able to go in and you get your I don't know what PAs get. They don't get a doctor, but the PA degree. If they were able to go in and get a PA degree and the government said, okay, we'll fund your PA degree. You go get this degree. And just like the military, you owe us 4 years of work after that.
Yeah.
How many people would do it?
So
here's a lot.
Yeah. Here's my proposal to the Trump administration, right? And I am taking an optimistic view on this thing, right? We want to shake up the DOE.
Sure.
We want to shake up the government. We want to be radicalized, right? I am going to take a optimistic view that you want everybody to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Here's what we do. We are going to reinstate vocational programs into school systems, right? We are going to solve our own problems. We need more nurses. We need more tradesmen. We need more professionals. Here's how we get those back. We are going to put those schools. You're not learning shit in schools anyway. You can't read. You can't do math. You can't do history. Well, guess what? You are now going to have to go to shop class. You're going to have to go, you want to be a nurse, you're going to have to go to nursing school. If you go to nursing school, you can get your nursing certificate simultaneously. That way, by the time you graduate high school, you'll already have your nursing certificate with you. You can go to work, and that'll help you pay for college. That'll help you bring down the cost of college. So that way,
some schools do that.
Yeah, well, some schools do it now, but what I'm saying is we do that on a broader level. We make it a national issue, right? So what we're doing is we're killing two birds with one stone. No, this isn't about everybody going to college. What this is about
exact opposite.
Yeah, this is about is giving everyone an option to have a skill in a trade. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. You're right, Liberty. What I'm saying is
we missed the great idea part.
Yeah, what I'm saying is what you're doing, and we're reversing what happened, and I know why we did it in the 80s. I don't have my tinfoil hat because we moved some stuff around, but for whatever reason we took those things out of the schools, right? But this is where we course correct. One that teaches our generation, because we can agree that Gen Z is done, right? They're done. We have to give up. They're washed. We can't do shit with them. They're gone. God bless them. We'll wish
I hope
them
that's
well,
not
right?
true.
Yeah. I mean, they have a chance to course correct, but they're done, right? We just got to wish them well, and we hope that there's no world wars. We got to start with Gen Alpha, right? We got to start from the beginning, right? If you want to instill patriotism, you want to instill the ideals of self-reliance, self-respect. You want to instill those traditional American ideals
and Christian nationalism while you're at it, KJ.
I stay away from that. All right. What I'm saying is you start teaching them self-reliance. And the best way you do that is you start teaching them skills and responsibility at the lower levels, right? You start teaching them how to cook. You start teaching them how to do taxes. You start teaching them those things, those skills, those life skills in the school system, right? That are going to help them succeed, right? That's how we do it. That's how we get back to basics.
So KJ, let me propose something with that to you, because part of the problem is what is being taught, right? What is being taught? Okay. So as long as you have teachers that are more concerned with making sure everybody loves their feelings and everybody's happy in school and all the LGBTQ plus YYZ, FGM are all copacetic and this and that. Get back to the basics, like you said.
Yeah.
Reading, writing, arithmetic, right? And then you need to have school choice be done in a way. I'm all for radical school choice. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to have in Georgia, and this is a low number, but let's say $10,000 per kid, right?
Sure.
If I want to say, I am willing to teach 15 students in my house, you give me your $10,000 that the government is providing for education, and I will give a better education, and I will take any kid between the ages of, and it could be a wide range, let's say between 8 and 18, because then all I need is 15 kids. I'm now getting paid enough that it's worth it for me to teach these kids. I'm going to have 15 kids in my class. I'm going to be able to individualize what they learn. I'm going to be able to keep track of 15 kids. That's not too many kids. I'm going to have the older kids mentor the younger kids. I'm going to let them look. Kid wants to get up and go to the bathroom. Hey, go use the bathroom. You know what, little Billy, you're bouncing off the wall. Hey, who wants to go outside with Billy and throw the baseball for a few minutes? Go. That's cool. Because the rest of us, we're going to be talking about, today we're talking about Joan of Arc. Conversation's really good. It morphs into, it turns into TUPOG, right?
Yep.
We've gone from Joan of Arc and somebody else brought up, Barrett versus Brown and the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
My parents were talking about this. Hey, that's really interesting. Well, what's your point? And education. Now, the reading, writing, arithmetic, that stuff is so basic. I read a book that said you can teach somebody how to read in 100 hours. Little kids, 100 hours. Well, if your kids are going to school for 180 days and they're not reading, that's a failure by the school system and the teachers. Math, you get basic. Why are we doing new math? I can show a kid how to do any of this stuff pretty simply. Now, I've told these kids in high school while I've been volunteering in these schools, because some of them are like, why do we even do this? This is so stupid. Hey, you're a sub. Let's talk about this. I said, you're absolutely right. You guys are doing advanced geometry here, right? You're doing some pretty high level stuff that I forgot. I did this back when I was in high school. I get it. And I'll tell you right now, for the most part, unless you're going into a STEM job, you won't use it either. You might use fractions and stuff for that, for if you're doing carpentry, but that's really about it. But the value is not the education of what algebra is. The value is, how do you get from question to answer? And that's what especially geometry does. Geometry says, here's the question, how do you get the answer? And you have to show your work. And if you're able to show your work, what you're doing is you're critically thinking. And that's we've all talked. I think every parent out there would say that is a lost art in the schools, is our kids are not being taught critical thinking. And that's why math is so important. Creative thinking, that's where you have drama and band and all that. But like, how many kids go to school and study only so they can play football, only so they can play basketball, only, I love band, but I don't want to do anything. And nothing wrong with any of those. But if you don't have a core, and why are we requiring kids to do, freshman through senior year? If you come in, and this is the Chinese system is this, I don't know if we've talked about this. Chinese system is, at the end of elementary school, they take an entrance exam. The entrance exam determines what junior high school you go to. And the junior highs are ranked. This is the best one in the country. This is the crappiest one. And if you get a high grade, high score, you can go and you're slotted in. So the best of the best go to the best schools. At the end of junior high, same thing. And if your kid gets a low score coming out of elementary school, they can go into what's called a bushiban, which is a study school. For a year, they are there from 6 a.m. until 8 o'clock at night with like a 15-minute break for lunch. You know what they're doing? They're studying the entire time just to take a test the next year to try to get into a better middle school. Same thing at the end of middle school. If you don't get high enough and your parents say, hey, I'm going to put you in a bushiban instead so you get a better high school. By the time they get to college, college is cake. College is where, hey, you've made it. You're in a good college. You know what? Just, you know how to study, you know how to learn, you'll be fine. Here's the information you needed. And they learn it, right? It's the elementary, junior high, and high school. But here we have basically allowed our standards have slidden so far. We are worried. I mean, we've all seen the videos of the cosmetically interesting online talking about how they are more than happy to pass this kid or that kid, or it's important about this issue or that issue, instead of saying, hey, you know what? My kids are struggling with math. What are your thoughts? Very rarely does. I have a friend, a Twitter friend who I've never met. She asked that a couple months ago or a while ago. And she said, look, I have this one kid who just, won't sit still. She just won't stay in her desk. She's all over the place. She's a distraction to the other kids. What do I do? And I was reading some, and I added the responses to him. Like, well, first thing would be you move the kid up to the desk next to the teacher. Second one would be, does the administration know that this is going on? Third one, do the parents know? And her response was, first thing I did was move her up. Second thing I did was talk to the administration. Third one is we can't get a hold of the parents. So, okay. So at what point do you and the administration say, okay, this kid clearly needs some separate individual training, and that needs to be done somewhere that is not in our school. So the school district, we need to send them over to the school district to put them in a specialized school that is for these kids that just need a non-traditional school. And it's not that there's anything necessarily wrong with this child, but that kid cannot be in a classroom of 20 to 25 other kids and using up 40% of the teacher's time.
Yeah,
Same
I think
thing with
they have alternative schools, right? But they use them wrong. I think that the practice of alternative schools are wrong.
Right. And it's also very, very difficult to get that kid into the alternative school unless they've done something wrong. Like if they don't bite somebody, unless they bite somebody or something
prep.
violent.
Yeah, alternative school is prison prep.
Yeah.
That's what
absolutely.
Even when I was in school, we called it prison prep because that's all it was getting you ready for.
Right. So they also, in general, they do some, but they really don't. Like we are so stuck in the idea of, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. Why? If some kid is come through in third grade and they're performing in a fifth grade level, let them go study with the fifth graders for a while. Let's see how that goes. If you're going through in your high school, like I said to somebody, I don't remember who it was, but somebody was saying how their kid was doing really well in school. And they said, yeah, it's tough because they don't always get challenged. And I said, why don't you just have them get their GED? This was a sophomore. And she was like, oh, no, they need to get their high school. They're not going to do that. I was like, why? A GED and a high school diploma are the same thing. Nobody cares. It's you pass the test of basic knowledge. If you go get a GED after sophomore year, what do? Now you can start your tech school. You can go to college. You can start working if you prefer, if that's, you want to go out and get an internship, you want to whatever. Why are we so intent on making these kids stay in a public school for 12 years when a lot of them, A, don't need 12 years, B, get damaged because of its 12 years. My son right now, I guarantee you, if I went and I said, all right, Alex, you hate school, you want to be homeschooled. Here's the deal, dude. I will let you stay home, but you have to study for the GED. We're going to go get all the documents and you're going to study for the GED. And at the end of this year, he's a sophomore. You're taking the GED because at the very least, he's going to study what needs to be on the test. If he sucks, well, then he goes back to the high school, but homeschool for 6 months. If that's what you want to do, here's your standard. And if you,
I think we've gotten away from teaching, right? We don't, there's an art to teaching, if that makes sense, right? Like there's
absolutely,
and we've gotten away from that.
Well, it's become it's what. So I don't know if you put what Liberty said, but it's become school has become politicized.
Absolutely,
and there is a level of there in certain locations. I have not seen this in Georgia. The same way in California. Now we've been in KJ, I'm sure you have as well, because of moving around, you saw the different school systems. Each of my kids was born in a different state. We've had our kids in Jasper, Alabama, which is a tiny little town in Alabama. We've had them in the Houston system. We've had them in the San Antonio system, in the El Paso system, and the California and the Bay Area. And I think if you ask and now here in Augusta, Georgia, and I think if you ask the average person, where would you expect them to get the best education? I think pretty much up and down the board, they'd all say, well, of course it's going to be the Bay Area. That's where you have the tech companies and you have this and that and that. The California Bay Area was absolutely the worst. I will take that little school in Jasper, Alabama all day long because the school administrator or the superintendent who we knew She used common sense to say, we are going to teach these kids the basics. We're going to work with the parents so that they understand what we're doing, and we're going to hold the parents and the students accountable. Right. And as long as you don't have accountability, and this is where we go back with the federal government, as long as you don't have accountability for things like showing up at your job and doing your job, and yeah, it's going to take radical change. It's going to take a massive earthquakian shift. I don't know what that is. I think Trump right now is probably the most likely agent of change, of chaos. Some of the simple things like it'll never happen, but there are some things like, let's say you want to cut jobs. Okay, so how do you cut jobs in the federal? Just an example. Is ICE bloated and is the Border Patrol bloated? Well, not for the agents, but for the administrators, sure. All right. Well, so if you are an administrator and you work for ICE, well, guess what, dude? You're going to transfer. You're not going to be in DC. You need to go put a gun on, and you need to go walk the line.
It reminds me of something that the potential FBI agent or FBI director said. As much as I'm I don't think, I'm not a fan of his, but he said something. I listened to an interview he did. He said,
do you know which director? Do you remember which one it was?
Ash Patel, they're recommended.
Oh, the new guy. Okay.
They asked him, they said, what would you, this was before he was even, I think he was on John Brenner's podcast about 6 to 8 months ago. They said, hey, if Trump wins the election and you get nominated to be an FBI director, what's one of the first things you would do as director? He said, there's way too many people in DC. He said, one of the first things I would do is I would go in and I'd tell about 70,000 of them. I'd say, hey, pack your shit up, put your computers in your backpack, and go out into the country and go to work. And he said, I'd go into the J. Edgar Hoover building. I'd change the locks. I'd kick everybody out. And I'll tell them, go into the country and go solve some fucking crimes. And I froze, right? I froze. And out of all the nonsense he said, there was this spark of brilliance. And I was like, if you could just do more of that, if you could just say more of that, dude, you'd be the perfect candidate. But then 2 seconds later, he went off into this whole Q shit. And I was like, God, and that's, you could just stay normal for 10 minutes, bro. Just stay normal for 10 minutes. Sure. You'd be perfect. But
that becomes the question, though. It is, the craziness versus the fix, because the craziness, and I didn't hear the interview, but okay. So the common sense was pack your bags, get into the field. If the craziness is, and we need to find out who Q is and shut them down. Well,
no. He's a Q supporter.
He's a Q supporter? Then we need to listen to Q.
Yeah. And I'm like, dude, just
we have never talked about Q. And to me, one of the reasons, I don't know if you agree with this, one of the reasons we've never talked about Q is because I don't think either of us, at least I haven't gone down the rabbit hole of, I avoid crazy, if that makes sense.
My life
I hear a little bit of crazy. You and I have a friend, Specialist Ben Shovel. Shout out
to Benz. Benz is the man.
This guy, he was a specialist when we were in El Paso. And if you were bored, you were out in the field and it's just a boring day, nothing's going on. You're waiting for the reset of the guns. They're not going to do anything the rest of the day. It's 11 in the morning. You're going, we have nothing to do. You could literally say, Benz, what's the current conspiracy? And it was the Energizer Bunny wound up on cocaine. And you could ask him the most insane, hey, Benz, tell us about the army that is hidden in the Earth's crust. Tell us about the space convoy that is, where are they now? Are they out by Saturn? He knew every conspiracy there was. And it was hilarious, right? But I mean, everybody took it. We love the guy, but do I really think there's a mole army? No, of course not. So the craziness has its place, but at the same time, for all of crazy as Ben's was, if you said, Ben's, I need you to go outside and I need a hole dug that is 2 feet wide and 2 feet deep. Here's the shovel and gloves. I need it done in 2 hours. Guess what was done? He'd say, Roger.
And one of the most dependable guys. Like, you got me there. I knew no matter what you told Benz, you could count on it to get done. Yeah. Hey, Benz, when you head back to the training room, this is what I need. Here's the list. I need it by this date. Don't worry about it, Sarge. I got you. And that was it. Yeah. You fire and forget it, and it was done. So you got me there. Benz was one of the most dependable dudes in the unit. So yeah.
So the reason I say that is because I think that in a lot of ways kind of encapsulates who Trump is looking at for a lot of these positions. He sees them as somebody who they might have some kooky ideas. They might be a little off the wall, but I trust that they're going to get done what needs to be done. Now, Pete Hegseth,
some of them are straight up.
Well, but now we're talking about opinions, right? I look at Pete Hegseth. I sent you the podcast that I heard. You got about 30 minutes in, right? And I get it. There are certain ones I'm sure if you sent me, I'd be like, yeah, dude, I popped smoke after 20 minutes. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
And that's fine, right?
Yeah.
But the one thing I would hope we would agree on is that whatever part of Pete Hegseth you listen to, you knew that he truly wanted soldiers, the fighting force of the United States, to be taken care of and be in the best position to do their jobs.
Pete Hegseth is the soldier that you have to give safety briefs about. When you tell your female soldiers, be careful when you go out with battle buddies and choose your battle buddies wisely, you're telling them to protect yourself from soldiers like Pete Hegseth. Don't drink too much when you're out, and every battle buddy you drink with, be careful. That's how I feel about Pete Hegseth and the other dude, Matt Gaetz. Those are the soldiers who you know unequivocally. They could be the best soldiers in the world, but you know, just as sure as shit, you have to watch them.
So
and no matter what their intentions are, no matter how fast they run, no matter how well they shoot, they are just horrible fucking human beings that you cannot leave to their own devices.
I look at someone like Hegseth and I say, okay, because you're talking about an agent of chaos and because you're talking about needing such a drastic change, instead of putting in, I was going to say Joni Ernst, and I don't want her at all. DeSantis, I think is one, because Joni Ernst, I think she's blocking Hegseth because she actually wants the job, and to me, that's kind of a piece of crap person that would do that. But and I've heard other people say, who doubts that DeSantis would be a great Secretary of Defense? And I say, okay,
she seems like she'll flip on me too, Joni Ernst.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Joni Ernst, but DeSantis, let's assume DeSantis would be a very successful, well-qualified, good Secretary of Defense. Let Hegseth go in for 6 months and sink or swim. If he sinks, look, the military is not going to be worse off in 6 months because of Pete Hegseth. The military right now is so broken, it's ridiculous. And I think that's true of most of the people that I saw something that said, and this is where the perception comes in. It had a list of all the people that were coming in that Trump has nominated, so-and-so name, billionaire, so-and-so billionaire. And these are the people that are going to worry about the price of eggs. And I'm looking at this list going, every single one of these people that I'm seeing on this list that is a billionaire was not a billionaire when they were born, and their parents weren't billionaires that I can tell.
I think the cabinet net worth about 10 billion plus.
And you know what that tells me? That tells me you have a cabinet that is incredibly well qualified to be successful in whatever they have put their minds to. Now, you might have some mismatches, which
that is a way. That's definitely
fair enough.
a way.
You know, well, fair enough. You might put somebody like, you know, billionaire X and put him into let's use Linda McMahon. Let's use Linda McMahon. Linda McMahon is being put in as the Department of Education, right? Linda McMahon was in the cabinet, and she's getting killed by the left, which is not a surprise. Most of these people are getting killed by the left. But Linda McMahon didn't do a ton of damage in the first term, Trump term, with whatever she was. I don't remember what she even was. But if Linda McMahon is put in as the Secretary of Education, and the whole intent is to basically shut down the Department of Education, you can't break something. That if the whole point is to light the car on fire, does it really matter who drives the car to the parking lot? And I think that might be the case for a lot of this. A lot of it might be, we need these people who are willing to go in and truly have FU money.
It's not
FU
so much.
Money is an important thing.
It's not so much that it's character. Character matters, right? You spend a lot of time, like the party spent a lot of time talking about character and ethics, and this matters, and qualifications matter, and we need the right people for the right job. And then you go do all this bullshit, and then you get, you know, all these people who lie on their resumes, and they lie and they cheat and they steal, and then you just throw them in there, and then it's just like, oh well, boys will be boys, right? Linda McMahon has never, ever, never, I don't even think she's ever been to a public school, let alone know what one looks like, right? She lied on the damn school to get a school board position. She lied on her resume saying that she had a degree in education. When they asked her about it, she said, oh, I misspoke. And then 6 months later, they asked her about it, why she hadn't fixed it. She said, oh, I forgot to fix it. Like, you just
Tim Walz,
and then
Tim Walz was head coach. They all do it.
I get that they all do it. I get that they all do it. But your fervor, you were upset about that. You were upset about Tim Walz doing it. That bothered you. That
bothers me that McMahon does it.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You don't give a shit, Lance. You don't care.
Listen. If the point is for McMahon to go in and blow up the Department of Education, you could have worse than somebody who is actively trying to blow up the Department of Education.
I guess.
Look, I think that when you're talking about the integrity side, I don't think any of them have any integrity.
I don't. I'm not. But that's the thing. I'm not advocating. Yeah.
And just for the record, Tim Walz. The thing that bothered me about Tim Walz is the personal side. It's the representing yourself in a military way that you didn't do it. Like if you lie, if somebody lies, and I'm sure they all do, right, to some degree. But if I'm trying to think of anybody just as a general. Mike Lee from Utah. Okay. So if Mike Lee lies about the number of cases that he tried as a lawyer, I'm going, okay, yeah. I mean, he embellished, so what? But if somebody like Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut lies about fighting in Vietnam and being a decorated veteran, I have a problem with that because it's stolen valor. I'm not a lawyer. Now, if one of my friends said, oh, I'm way more offended by Mike Lee lying about that, and I'm making this up. I'm unaware of Mike Lee ever lying about the number of
I got you.
court cases. But if somebody else that was a lawyer that was worried about that, then I'd understand it, right? I think that the irony of this whole thing is that and this is going to sound strange, I want America to succeed.
It's not going to sound strange. I've already told you where I stand on that. I'm okay.
I always want America to succeed, and America is broken. And right now, to me, the most effective way to fix America is to break it more, if that makes sense. We need to, we as a country have rotted from within. We are on the path of the Romans, that we have gone down the path of sexual degradation. We are down the path of morality being thrown out the window.
Wait a minute. America was founded on sexual degradation. We're not going down. Yes, we were. We're not going down.
The Puritans didn't even want the ankles being shown.
Our founding fathers were some of the most heathenist, sexually depraved individuals.
You know what's weird about that? That is a normal thing throughout history. The most powerful people have always had the weirdest dudes. Like, they talk about how we could probably relay some stories about, I don't know, like Nancy Reagan and
right, but
things like that. And
what I'm saying, if we take it in the context, but if we take it in the context of history, are we any more sexually depraved than at any other time? The only difference is
yes, we are.
The only difference is you're just able to watch it.
So no, I think there is a difference, though, because when you're talking about leadership versus the average person.
Well, they didn't know what tampons were, Liberty.
So I think that when you're talking about this, like in Rome, it wasn't. Yes, you had Caligula, right? But only a century before, you had Marcus Aurelius, right? Marcus Aurelius probably was not the most sexually conservative dude. Mark Antony was not sexually he was not a monogamist. Alexander the Great certainly was not a monogamist. Alexander the Great had children because that was what was expected, and he was married to multiple women because that was what's expected. Alexander the Great was gay, so he did his duty to the throne. So the leaders, I think there is a disconnect, though, purposeful disconnect between the leader and the average person. Even back then in Rome, when you're looking at the height of Roman civilization, you did have a family base, right? The soldier was taking care of his family, his wife, his kid. You didn't have wife swapping. You didn't have and you're right. Maybe now is
wait. Roman culture, Roman and Greek culture were known for having some wild freak offs. They were known, and it wasn't just an elitist freak off. It was well integrated in the culture.
There were differences because there are some differences.
Can't argue it, bro. It's documented. We can't argue it. It's documented, man.
But you can argue about why they did it and the cultural aspects of it too, though. Like, okay, so right now, how acceptable would it be for somebody who's a 13-year-old boy to sleep in the same bed as a 13-year-old boy to be recruited into the military, and as part of their training, they're put in the same bed as a 27-year-old male?
Right. The morals have
and not just absolutely. and not only in the same bed, but to have sexual congress, not anal sex because they knew it was bad, but
right,
or it was dirty,
but the moral, what I'm saying, the morals have adjusted. What I'm saying is morals are a sliding scale depending on society.
Right. That's right. But okay, so by that argument, then maybe I just need to rephrase my argument. the moral norms were more adhered to at the height of the Roman culture than now.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So now we're at a point now in America where the deviance is becoming not the norm, but it is becoming normal.
Right.
When you have, I saw a video yesterday. Allie posted it, in fact.
The one where they were walking the dogs.
Yeah. And her whole thing was, when are we going to call out this mental illness? And my response was, well, is it mental illness or is it mental retardation? Because if you're dumb enough to let somebody put a leash around you and you're going to walk around on your hands and knees acting like a dog, I'm not sure that's mental illness so much as you're just not a very bright individual. So I'd like to think that, however, that is the outlier, and that more people think in terms of take care of your family, take care of your spouse, take care of your loved ones, take care of your extended family, take care of your neighborhood, take care of your community. And I think that actually is the norm. I think that we are, as a country, we keep going back to guests, but Greg Easterbrook. Greg has been drumming for years that we're in a pretty good situation.
Yeah, I don't disagree. But
yeah,
again, I mean, like I said, I will always preface everything with there are two Americas and there are two lived experiences with two very distinct, and there are two very distinct truths about America, right? And it's just what it is. One, and then I'll tie that into what Liberty was saying, how he was saying, yeah, you're absolutely right. I have a very conservative approach because I am by nature very conservative, but that still doesn't allow, I mean, that doesn't take away my ability to have an objective view, an objective worldview, right? When you look at everything from a historical, context, people being walked on leashes, even historically, still, I mean, hell, they had eunuchs, right? They would cut dudes' penises off and put them in chains and walk them around and have them, fan them with feathers. This is just people had kinks. Historically, kinks were there, right?
Yeah, but eunuchs is a bad example. They were forced into that. Those were slaves that were taken and forced to become eunuchs.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would hope those dudes at the bus stop weren't forced into it. But what I'm saying is, kinks are there, man. Kinks are there. Kinks, sure. Yeah. I mean, we can look at one of the most famous, founding fathers. Ben Franklin was a notorious kinkster. You know what I'm saying? His just legendary.
Just because he liked older women. Just because he liked the older women.
His legendary exploits are notorious, right? And celebrated.
Okay, is that a kink? Or is that him using logic? Do you know what his argument for that was? Have you ever read why Ben Franklin did what he did?
We read Franklin in high school, believe it or not. We were reading about his adventures, his adventures in high school, which is weird, right? Because you think about how far we've gone, and that's why I say the pendulum always swings, right? Because we were reading about that in high school, and you know what I'm saying, it was normal because it was in the context of history. But yeah, it's just one of them things, man. So I never get too high or I never get too high or too low when it comes to those things, man. I just kind of take it all in. Right. I just take it all in stride, man. And I enjoy the ride, man. It's a weird place to be in. And I recognize it in the two American experiences, you're gonna see things totally different, and they're gonna be absolutely true from two totally different lenses.
Oh yeah, the perspective argument. But let me ask you something, because you said that multiple, not just today, but the two lived experiences. I guess I look at it in terms of it, if I might, the gender argument. To me, there are only two possible answers to gender.
Sure.
There are two genders, male and female.
Yes.
Or B, there are 7.5 billion genders, meaning everybody has their own ideas of gender.
Yes.
And whatever they feel is what they're. Okay. So to me, that's very similar to when you say the viewpoint of America, there's two views of America. Well, I have a hard time with that because I think your viewpoint and my viewpoint are different. But my viewpoint is not the same as my brother's, and he's just as white as I am. And I'm sure there's black people who, so it's tough for me because now if you start breaking down, I hate multiculturalism. I think multiculturalism is ridiculous because again, if you break it down far enough, multiculturalism becomes individualism. And I'm fine with individualism. Mm-hmm. If you want to tell me, and you and I have had some really interesting conversations, I'm not going to throw anything out there, but you and I talked, you had a rattling experience a few years ago. I will just say police related, and that's just so you know what I'm talking about. And so I appreciate where you're coming from. I appreciate your experience. At the same time, former MP, I can see why the police did the things they did. It doesn't eliminate the fact that you were traumatized by what happened, rightfully so. But it's to me, I look at that and say, that is your experience. And it is not the same as George Floyd. It is not the same as But when we say, this is why it bothers me though a little bit. Not I'm just gonna say it because when you say there's two experiences, I look at that and go, well, wait a minute. Why is it two experiences when I would say there's 330 million Americans? There are 330 million different experiences.
No,
because not all blacks share the same. And if you start going into it, why? What about Indians?
No.
I'm sorry.
Everybody's going to have. I mean, life is a different experience for everyone. So it's not an experience, right? But when I talk about America, I'm talking about the way America was set up. It was set up distinctly for two. It was set up distinctly for two different. There's two different tiers, right? It was set up for the haves and the have-nots. That's nothing that I can control, and that's not race-based at all.
Oh, okay. Because then I'm misinterpreting because it definitely comes off as race.
Yeah. So when we talk about experiences, everybody, when you live life, you're going to have a different experience. Everybody rides the roller coaster and experiences a different sensation, right? When you ride the roller coaster, right? But the way the country was set up, the country was set up for the haves and the have-nots, right? And that's nothing that we can't change. We're still dealing
but
with
at the same but even that I have a hard time with that because this country was set up with an understanding that there were haves and have-nots, but it's also the only country that truly has been set up so that the movement up is possible. There's more opportunity to move up into the haves in this country historically than any other country.
For who? But for who? Because and that just further, I'm gonna tell you that just further reinforces my point because as you see it as an opportunity for people to move up. It wasn't until the late 20th century for us to even have an equal footing. We're talking 40 years. 40 years ago. Well, 60 now. So we're talking 60 years.
But what I'm saying is, hear that, but if you go back though, and now we're talking historically, nobody was even, right? Nobody was even, because you go back far enough. Everybody's been in slavery at some point. You go back and you say, well, the Irish.
This has nothing to do with slavery. This has nothing to do with this has nothing to do with slavery. This is talking about pure disadvantages, right? We take slavery away. You can start at 1864, right? Take slavery out and say, all right, hey man, we fucked up. Slavery was wrong.
If you had just said, hey, we fucked up and slavery was wrong, we'll call it even there. We could have started at Reconstruction and been good, right? But what happened? We didn't.
We didn't. What happened was one individual, along with a couple others, put a bullet in the back of Abraham Lincoln's head.
That's what I'm saying, though. But that's what I'm saying. It's still, and I'm not blaming nobody. There's nobody to blame. No, I'm not against capitalism. I am absolutely in favor of capitalism.
So KJ, here's the problem. Ultimately, and I think this is maybe the most blunt way I can put it. Life isn't fair. It never has been. It's never. You go into any country in history. I'm being told I've got a hard cut here.
I was actually.
I'm looking at the.
Sorry.
He apologizes. Okay, so let me make this point. Final thought for me. Life isn't fair. It never has been. You can go back. You want to go back to all the way back to those merchants in Babylon that were making more money because they figured out that if they could read, that they were going to make more money by being part of the merchant class and inventing the merchant class, all the way to the slaves that built the pyramids, to the serfs in England, to Ireland being the slaves of England, to the certain tribes in Africa being more powerful than other tribes. One of the richest men in the world ever being a African king, and then he was taken advantage of, and that nation basically was destroyed because of the Barbers who came in from north of the Sahara, which included Arabic and Muslims who destroyed that country. You've always had the ebbs, and you've had the positive, you've had the negatives, and when you say, who can get ahead? Well, I mean, I look at it and I go, Oprah, who's one of the most rich and famous people in the world, and I understand it's individual. You have to have luck and you have to have all that, but Oprah didn't exactly come from wealth any more than Musk did or Zuckerberg. So just because you work hard, and just because you live in America, and just because you do those things, look, tell me why George Clooney is such a superstar actor instead of I don't know, some dude that we don't know because he just didn't get the same break that Clooney did. Why is Denzel Washington instead of some guy that we're going to see later today on a commercial, KFC commercial, or on a Hertz commercial?
Oh my brother.
Luck. There's nothing. So KJ, if you hit it big because of your hard work, you sit at the computer and you are doing those things you got to do, and you are able to be successful, I think there's two ways to look at that. You have those people who will look at you and say, you didn't deserve it, and you took that should have been me, even though they didn't put the work in, even though they didn't want to put in the effort.
The first thing they would say? They would say it was because it was a DEI. It says I only got it because they would say I only got it because of.
But would you care?
That's the game, though. But see, you keep thinking that the chief complaint is because it's not fair or it's not equal, when we can't even acknowledge that it's a game to begin with. And I'm not saying you. I'm not.
I
saying
would argue this.
Society as a whole.
No, but
they refuse to even acknowledge that the game exists.
But I would argue this. I'd say you'd get more hate from black guys than you would from white guys. If you made it big, I'll bet you would have more hate from the black community than from the white community going, why is this black dude getting this and I'm not? I think you'd have other black guys.
You'd get hate.
And maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, the hate is irrelevant. The game is the game. It doesn't matter what the color of the face is. The message is still going to be the same thing. Because the message is going to be the only reason why is because he's DEI. And until we acknowledge that the game is there, we're going to have an issue. And that's the whole
DEI is a relatively new thing.
Huh?
Okay.
All right. We'll have to catch it up later. Man.
As far as the label, it is. But.
The term is new, but the premise has always been there. Either way, good brother. Great conversation, man. We'll pick it up next time.
We got to have some other people on.
Yeah,
I like having guests.
Indeed. All right, my brother. I'll get it scheduled out. All right. Say bye.
Talk to you.
Bye.
Gee, Ray, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
All right. Yo, let's get into it.
Try to take over the world. Try to take over the world.
And greatest chaplain in the world, Mr. Lance O'Neill.
Try to take over the world.